I still remember that night, the night my husband told me I didn't belong. His words still echo in my head, not because of their cruelty, but because they changed everything. The luxury gala, his biggest event of the year, the one he'd been planning for months. Sponsors, cameras, celebrities, all the people he secretly wanted to impress. And me? His wife. The woman who had stood beside him through every late night, every broken deal, every storm. But on that night, he looked at me like I was a stranger. Not his partner. Not his support. Just someone who didn't fit in his perfect picture. It's a formal event, darling. You might feel out of place. That's what he said. Smiling, almost politely. Like he was doing me a favor by keeping me invisible. At first I laughed it off. He'd been stressed, I told myself. Maybe I was overthinking it. But deep down, something inside me cracked. A small, quiet break that would grow into something far louder than either of us could imagine. Because when someone you love tells you you're not enough, it doesn't just hurt. It burns. It plants a seed. And that seed becomes your fire. I didn't know it then. But that night would be the beginning of everything. The humiliation, the whispers, the loneliness, and the sweet, unforgettable revenge that would turn his perfect gala into my stage. You see, he thought he was the headline that night. But destiny had a different plan. And it started with one sentence, one quiet rejection that became the loudest awakening of my life. Sometimes the people who make you feel small are the very reason you rise higher than you ever imagined. Before the gala, before the humiliation, before everything changed, my life looked perfect from the outside. At least that's what everyone believed. I was married to Daniel Hartman, a name people in our city whispered with admiration. He was the youngest executive at a luxury real estate firm, always wearing those tailored suits, driving cars that caught reflections wherever he went. When he walked into a room, conversations paused for half a second, long enough for him to feel like he owned it. And me, I was the woman on his arm, the one with the polite smile, the careful words, the dress that always matched his tie. People called us a power couple. But behind closed doors, power has a strange way of showing itself. In the beginning, Daniel was charming, thoughtful even. He used to bring me coffee in bed, leave notes on the counter that said, "Couldn't have done this without you." We'd sit up late, talking about the future, our dream home, our plans, the family we'd build once his career settled. He used to say, "You keep me grounded, love. You're my calm in the storm." And I believed him. I really did. But success, it changes people. Slowly, quietly, like a tide that pulls you away before you even realize you're drifting. At first, it was small things, missing dinner, answering calls at midnight, staying late at work. Then it was bigger, canceled trips, forgotten anniversaries, excuses wrapped in expensive gifts. He'd say, "You know how demanding my job is, right?" And I'd nod, convincing myself that's what love meant. Understanding, patience, endurance. But what I didn't see then was that every "it's just work" was a small brick in a wall he was building between us. We used to live in a small apartment when we first got married. Warm, cluttered, full of laughter. When he got his first big promotion, he surprised me with a house. White marble floors, chandeliers, rooms that echoed when I spoke. I should have been happy, but something about that silence never sat right with me. He started hosting parties for investors, clients, other executives. At first, he wanted me by his side. He'd introduce me with pride. "This is my wife, Grace, the woman behind the man." But as his circles grew glossier and colder, his tone changed. The introductions faded. I became the woman who smiled from the corner. He'd talk, laugh, and charm. And I'd stand there, holding a glass I never finished, watching him glow under lights that never seemed to touch me. One night after a dinner party, I asked him softly, "Do you even see me anymore?" He looked up from his laptop, barely glancing at me. "Grace, you're overthinking. You know I appreciate you. Appreciate, not love. Not cherish. Appreciate, like a loyal employee, not a wife." Still, I stayed. Because that's what you do when you believe love just needs time to breathe again. But the truth was, It wasn't love that needed air. It was me. Then came the announcement, the gala. Daniel's voice was full of pride when he told me about it. "It'll be the biggest night of my career," he said. "Everyone who matters will be there." I smiled and said, "I'll start looking for a dress." He paused, just long enough for me to notice. Then he said too carefully, "Actually, it's more of a professional thing. You might not feel comfortable there." My hand froze on the table. His words landed sharp, polite on the surface, cruel underneath. "Not comfortable?" I asked. "It's your event, Daniel. Our event." He looked at me with that calm, detached expression I'd grown to hate. "It's just the crowd. It's a different circle, Grace. You wouldn't enjoy it." That night, after he went to bed, I sat in the dark living room. The city lights poured through the windows, glittering against the glass, mocking me almost. He didn't just tell me not to come. He told me I didn't belong. And that realization, it broke something deep inside me. Because for the first time, I saw what he truly thought of me. Not a partner, not an equal, but a shadow he could hide when the spotlight got too bright. But I didn't cry that night. Not like before. No, I smiled. Because a woman who has been silenced for too long eventually learns how to make noise. And Daniel was about to learn what silence can sound like when it finally decides to speak. The morning after that quiet conversation, Daniel was different. Colder, sharper, like the distance between us had become an unspoken rule. He started leaving earlier for work. No goodbye kisses, no morning jokes about the burnt toast or how I always misplaced my keys. Just a curt nod, a tap on his watch, and the sound of the door closing. And every evening, the same excuse. "Just one more meeting, Grace. This gala is bigger than you think." At first, I tried to keep supporting him. I told myself that if I stayed calm, if I stayed kind, maybe the man I married would come back. But soon I realized he wasn't coming back. He was reinventing himself and erasing me in the process. The gala became his obsession. Every conversation revolved around it. The guest list, the sponsors, the speeches, the red carpet arrangements. I'd catch him smiling at his reflection in the mirror while adjusting his tie, whispering lines under his breath. Lines meant for the cameras, the crowd, the people he wanted to impress. But what hurt most was how little space I occupied in that vision. One evening, I asked softly, "Do you want me to help with the preparations?" He didn't even look up from his phone. "There's a professional team handling it, Grace. Just trust me to do this right. Trust me." The words used to feel safe. Now they sounded like a door closing. Still, I watched. I watched the small cracks forming in his perfect world. He'd come home late, loosen his tie, pour himself a drink, and I could see it. The tiredness, the quiet frustration that followed him into the silence of our home. He'd talk to himself sometimes, muttering about a deal that wasn't final, a sponsor who pulled out, an image consultant who demanded changes. The man who once had everything under control was starting to tremble beneath the weight of his own expectations. And though I should have felt sympathy, I didn't, because every time I remembered how he looked at me, how he said, "You might not belong there," that sympathy turned to something else. Something colder, sharper, a quiet resolve. Then, one evening, I overheard him on the phone. He was in his study, door slightly open. His voice was soft, charming, the voice he used for clients. But there was something in his tone that made my chest tighten. "Yes, she's fine. No, she won't be attending. Of course it's better that way." He laughed lightly. "She's sweet, but you know how these things are. She doesn't quite fit that crowd." That crowd. Those words hit harder than he could ever imagine. I stood in the hallway frozen, not just because of the words, but because I realized he was talking about me like an inconvenience. A piece of furniture that didn't match the decor. That night, when he walked past me, I smiled. The kind of smile that hides storms behind calm eyes. Because in that moment, something inside me shifted. I stopped being the woman waiting for his attention. I became the woman studying his every move. The weeks before the gala were a quiet performance. He acted like everything was perfect, flashing smiles, rehearsing his speech, practicing charm. But I started to see through the mask. The late-night messages, the unreturned calls, the perfume that wasn't mine on his jacket. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining it, until the night I found a message on his tablet. A woman's name I didn't recognize. The message said, "Can't wait to see you shine at the gala. You deserve the spotlight." I stared at those words until they blurred. Not because of tears, but because they confirmed what I already knew. He didn't just want to erase me. He wanted to replace me. The next morning, I greeted him with his coffee, smiling as if nothing was wrong. He looked surprised, maybe even relieved. "You're in a good mood today," he said. I nodded. "Just thinking about your big night." He smirked, proud. "You see? I told you, Grace, it'll be worth it." I smiled again, the kind of smile that hides entire plans behind silence. Because what he didn't know was that I'd already begun writing my own ending to his perfect story. One he'd never see coming. They say silence is a woman's most dangerous weapon. And sometimes, the sweetest revenge starts with pretending not to notice, until the moment everyone else finally does. I used to believe betrayal came like thunder, loud, sudden, impossible to ignore. But when it finally arrived in my life, it didn't roar. It whispered. It came in the way Daniel stopped saying "we." It came in the way his eyes slid past me when someone more important walked by. And it came, most painfully, in the way he still called me darling, like a polite habit he'd forgotten how to mean. He didn't need to say the words. His silence told me everything. The days before the gala blurred into one long performance. He'd talk about catering menus, guest lists, and investors, his phone always buzzing with names I'd never heard. And when I tried to ask questions, gentle, curious, he'd pat my hand and say, "You don't need to worry about all this, Grace. It's not your world. Not your world." Those words built walls faster than bricks ever could, so I stopped asking, stopped reminding him I was still there. Instead, I started observing, quietly, carefully. There was a woman. Her name was Elena Pierce, one of his firm's new investors. Beautiful, confident, and the kind of woman who wore her power like perfume. I met her once, by accident, when I dropped by his office to bring him lunch. She was standing beside him, laughing softly, her hand resting just a little too comfortably on his arm. When Daniel saw me, he hesitated. Just for a second. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that felt staged. "Grace, this is Elena. She's helping us make the gala unforgettable." Elena extended her hand, perfectly manicured, deliberate. "Oh, so you're Grace. Daniel's mentioned you." There was something in her tone, a sweetness coated in steel. A quiet claim hidden behind the words. I shook her hand, steady, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "I'm glad to finally meet you," I said. "You seem unforgettable already." For a moment, our eyes met. She understood what I meant, and so did I. That night, I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe she was just another client. Maybe I was overreacting. But intuition doesn't lie, especially a woman's. It speaks in quiet chills, in uneasy silences, in that heavy feeling in your chest that says, "You already know the truth." So I started noticing more. The way Daniel's phone would light up with her name. The way he smiled at messages and tucked the phone away when I entered the room. The way he'd suddenly wear cologne he hadn't used in years. He was still polite, still loving in the performative sense. But it wasn't love anymore. It was maintenance, keeping appearances tidy until he could rewrite the story. One evening, he came home later than usual. His tie was loose, his shirt half unbuttoned, the smell of wine and expensive perfume trailing him. He saw me waiting by the window and sighed. "Don't start, Grace. It was a business dinner." I didn't argue. I just said quietly, I didn't say a word. He poured himself a drink and muttered, "You never do." And he was right. I didn't. Because while he was busy performing success, I was learning silence. And silence, I'd come to realize, was my stage. Days later, the invitations arrived. Gold foil, embossed lettering, the Hartman Foundation Charity Gala. Our names were printed together, though I knew he never intended for me to be there. He left the stack of invitations on the kitchen counter. I picked one up, tracing the elegant script with my finger. Then I saw it, a small handwritten note on one of the cards. Elena, front table, near press section. You'll look stunning as always. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I simply smiled. Because at that moment, his betrayal stopped being my heartbreak and became my motivation. That night, I went into the closet and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a necklace, a simple silver pendant Daniel had given me years ago when he got his first big promotion. He'd said, "You're my lucky charm, Grace, my light." As I held it in my hand, I realized something. He might have forgotten those words, but I hadn't. And maybe it was time I reminded him what happens when you dim someone's light. They learn to shine without your permission. So I began to plan. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. Not to destroy him, but to make him see. I reached out to old friends I hadn't spoken to in years, people who remembered me, not just Daniel's wife. I called the charity he was supposedly fundraising for, and found out the truth. The donations weren't matching his promises. And quietly, behind the scenes, I began stitching together a new story. One where I wasn't the shadow. One where his gala, his grand display of power and control, would finally reveal who he truly was. They say betrayal changes you. It doesn't make you cruel. It makes you awake. And once you've woken up, you stop asking for space in someone else's story. You start writing your own. And mine was just beginning. The night of the gala arrived like a storm that everyone else mistook for celebration. The city was alive with lights, limousines gliding through the streets, laughter spilling from champagne glasses, camera flashes painting everything gold. It was the kind of night Daniel had dreamed of, polished, grand, glittering with power. And the kind of night I was never meant to see. But I went. Not as his guest, not as his wife, but as the woman he underestimated. When I stepped out of the car, the air felt heavy, a mix of perfume, pride, and pretension. The hotel hosting the gala looked like something out of a dream. Crystal chandeliers, marble staircases, and waiters gliding through crowds like shadows. Everywhere I looked, I saw Daniel's reflection. His voice in the banners, his face on the program covers, his name shimmering in golden letters. The Hartman Foundation Charity Gala. And there he was, at the center of it all. My husband, in his element. He looked perfect. Tailored tuxedo, polished smile, surrounded by people who clapped when he laughed, who leaned in when he spoke. And right beside him was her. Elena. She stood close, too close, in a gown that sparkled like a promise. The crowd adored them, the picture of power and poise. But to me, they looked like two people rehearsing a lie. I didn't walk in dramatically. No one gasped when I entered. I was quiet, composed, invisible, just how he liked me. But I wasn't there to cause a scene. I was there to watch, and to wait. I took a seat toward the back of the hall, blending into the crowd of faces who had no idea what tonight would become. As the speeches began, Daniel walked up to the podium. The room fell silent, light softening around him like a halo. He looked around, confident, charming, rehearsed, the man who had built his life on being admired. Tonight, he began, we celebrate success, generosity, and the people who make it all possible. His voice was smooth, perfect. He had practiced every pause, every smile. He thanked his colleagues, the investors, the guests. He even thanked Elena, calling her the heart of this year's event. The room applauded. My heart didn't. He never mentioned me. Not once. Not as the woman who'd supported him from his first job to this very stage. Not as the partner who'd sacrificed her own dreams so his could rise higher. In that moment, I felt invisible, again. But invisibility can be powerful when you know what to do with it. Then came the part that broke whatever piece of hope I still had left. During the charity presentation, the event's host called Daniel and Elena up together. They walked on stage, smiling for the cameras as if they were the story everyone came to see. And when the press started asking questions, someone from the crowd shouted, "Are you two the power couple behind the foundation?" Daniel didn't deny it. He laughed, placed a hand on Elena's back, and said, "We're certainly a great team." The crowd cheered. Flashes went off, and I just sat there frozen. It wasn't anger that filled me. It was something deeper, humiliation, the kind that strips away the last pieces of who you thought you were. Because it wasn't just that he betrayed me. It was that he did it so proudly. I could have walked out. I could have screamed, thrown the truth at their perfect faces, but I didn't. Instead, I smiled. A calm, steady smile, the kind that unsettles anyone who's ever thought they broke you. Because I knew something Daniel didn't. While he was busy crafting his image, I had been crafting a truth, one that was about to unravel everything he'd built. Earlier that week, I'd reached out to the charity's finance director, an old college acquaintance. I had questions about the Gala funds, the donations, the philanthropy Daniel kept boasting about. What I discovered was simple and devastating. Half the promised funds never reached the charity. Invoices had been altered. Documents forged. Daniel wasn't just arrogant. He was careless. And I had proof. So while he stood under the lights, soaking in applause, I quietly sent a message. One that contained every piece of evidence I'd collected. Screenshots, documents, voice notes, straight to the event organizers, straight to the press. And as the speeches went on, I watched something magical happen. The whispers started. Faces in the crowd began to shift. Phones buzzed. Eyes darted. Daniel noticed it too. His voice faltered. He looked around, confused, as people began murmuring. Moments later, one of the sponsors stood up and walked out. Then another. And another. Elena's smile faded. Daniel's hands trembled slightly at the podium. He leaned forward, trying to regain control. "Ladies and gentlemen, please, there's been..." But the damage was already done. A reporter's voice cut through the noise. "Mr. Hartman, would you like to comment on the missing charity funds?" The room erupted. Flashes everywhere. Voices rising, questions flying like arrows. Daniel's face drained of color. Elena stepped back. And from my seat at the back, the place he said I didn't belong, I watched him crumble. That was the moment everything he'd built, the image, the lies, the arrogance, cracked wide open. The humiliation he'd once given me came full circle. Only this time, it wasn't whispered in private. It was broadcast under chandeliers, and while he stood there speechless, I quietly rose from my seat. As I walked toward the exit, someone from the press brushed past me, phone still recording. For just a second, the camera caught my face. Calm, unreadable, walking away from the chaos. By the next morning, that clip would go viral with the caption, "The woman who walked away from his downfall." Sometimes revenge isn't about shouting. It's about standing still while the person who broke you finally trips on the lies they built. And that night, as I stepped out into the cold air, I realized I wasn't humiliated anymore. I was free. For days after the gala, silence followed me everywhere. Not the kind that soothes you, the kind that echoes. The house felt like a museum of lies. His suit still hung in the closet, perfectly pressed. The mug he used every morning still sat on the counter, half chipped at the rim, the same one I used to wash by hand because the dishwasher scratches it, he'd said. Funny how I once thought caring was love. Now it just felt like evidence of all the small ways I'd kept his world spotless while mine fell apart. The news spread faster than I ever could have imagined. Headlines, podcasts, clips of his downfall playing on every screen. Charity scandal exposes CEO. Elena Cruz and Daniel Hartman under investigation. The perfect couple, not so perfect after all. People speculated. People judged. People forgot that behind every headline there's a woman who once believed. But I didn't speak. Not to the press. Not to the curious friends who suddenly remembered my number. My silence was no longer weakness, and it was strategy. Every morning, I sat by the window with my coffee, watching the light move across the floor. And I realized something. Silence isn't empty. It's full of answers if you're brave enough to listen. At first, the quiet hurt. It reminded me of the nights I waited for him to come home, pretending I didn't know where he was. But slowly, that same quiet began to shift. The ache turned into clarity. The stillness became peace. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for an apology. Not for closure. Not for him. One afternoon, I went into our shared office, the one lined with his awards and framed photos of our perfect life. I stood there for a long time, staring at the desk we once worked at together. Then I started removing things. Every photo, every plaque, every trace of his empire. I didn't smash them. I didn't burn them. I packed them neatly into boxes. Precision, not rage. Because rage is still attachment. And I was done being attached. When I was finished, the room looked different. It breathed again. It looked like mine. I started rebuilding in quiet ways. Reading again, journaling, running at sunrise. Sitting with myself long enough to feel the parts of me that I'd buried to make space for him. And one morning, as I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the same woman who'd once begged for his attention. I saw someone who survived her own silence and turned it into strength. Then the letter arrived. A formal envelope. His handwriting. He was sorry. He didn't mean for things to go this far. He wanted to talk. For a second, the old version of me, the one who believed love could fix everything, almost reached for the phone. But then I remembered that gala night. That moment when he laughed while I disappeared in the crowd. And I knew I'd never go back to being invisible again. I didn't reply. That was my closure. Months later, I stood outside a small community center, the same charity his foundation had once claimed to support. But this time the funds were real. The work was quiet, honest, human. When they asked what brought me there, I simply said, I just want to help. And in that moment, I realized the truth. Revenge wasn't the highlight of my story. It was just the turning point. The real victory was this. I didn't let the pain define me. I let it refine me. Silence once broke me. Now it builds me. Because sometimes the most powerful sound in the world is the one you make when you finally stop explaining yourself. Revenge. People think it's loud, fiery, impulsive, dramatic. But the truth is, real revenge is quiet. It doesn't happen in chaos. It happens in calm. In silence. In the long nights where you rebuild yourself, piece by piece, until the person they destroyed no longer exists, and the one who replaces her is unstoppable. That was me. After months of silence, I wasn't the same woman who cried in the back of a limousine, humiliated and invisible. That version of me was gone. Buried. Now I wanted to rise but not to destroy him. No, to expose him. To outgrow him so completely that he couldn't touch the air I breathed. Daniel's scandal had cracked his empire. But he was still standing, barely. He'd cut ties with his mistress publicly, hired a crisis PR team, and was already planning a redemption event, another gala. Of course, he couldn't help himself. His ego needed an audience. When I heard the announcement, I almost laughed. Hartman Foundation to host Charity Revival Gala. Same venue, same sponsors, same man, pretending nothing had happened. But this time, I wouldn't be standing outside the glass walls looking in. I'd be standing on the stage. For months, I'd been quietly building something of my own, using everything I'd learned in those years beside him, the business contacts, the strategies, the details he'd dismissed when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Every insult, every humiliation. It had all taught me how his world worked. So I used it. I started reaching out to the very people he'd wronged, the employees he underpaid, the investors he misled, the donors who'd been left in the dark. Not for gossip, but for truth, for accountability. We started a new initiative, transparent, honest, community-driven, a foundation with no hidden agenda, no luxury, no false smiles, every penny accounted for, every story heard. And within months, it grew. Quietly at first, then fast. So fast that people started comparing us, my little startup charity versus his glamorous empire. And then the whispers began. Did you know she's his ex-wife? She's doing it better and without the lies. I didn't post about it. I didn't flaunt it. I let results speak louder than my voice ever could. But behind the scenes, I had one final move, something poetic. A perfect ending to the story he started the night he told me I didn't belong. 1 week before his redemption gala, I received an invitation. His invitation. Whether it was pride or guilt, I'll never know. But there it was, embossed and gold. The Hartman Foundation, a night of renewal. I smiled when I saw the tagline. Renewal. He had no idea what that word truly meant. I wasn't planning to attend, not until fate stepped in. An email landed in my inbox the same night. We'd like to recognize your organization for its outstanding impact this year. You're nominated for the City Humanitarian Award. The ceremony will be held at the Hartman Gala. I froze. The award wasn't from him. It was from the board, the city's independent committee. I laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from somewhere deep, raw, free. Because now he couldn't erase me. He couldn't deny me. He couldn't silence me. The same stage he once told me I didn't belong on was now waiting for me. I prepared quietly. No designer gowns this time. No borrowed jewels. Just a sleek, elegant dress. Simple, graceful, powerful. The kind that said, I'm not here to impress you. I'm here because I earned it. As I stood in front of the mirror that night, I didn't see revenge staring back. I saw transformation. Power without venom. Confidence without cruelty? My revenge wasn't about destroying him. It was about reclaiming myself. My voice, my story. And soon, the world would hear it. That night, when I walked through those golden doors again, the same chandelier sparkled above me. But everything had changed. The whispers weren't mocking anymore. They were curious, respectful. I didn't need to announce my presence. My name was already on the program, printed, highlighted, and waiting to be spoken into the microphone. This time, I belonged more than anyone else in that room. And he knew it. What he didn't know was that this gala wouldn't just mark his comeback, it would mark his final fall. Because I hadn't just come to collect an award, I'd come to reveal a truth he'd buried, and this time the entire world was watching. The lights of the Hartman Grand Ballroom shimmered like 1,000 little secrets that night. Every corner glowed gold. The champagne flowed, the camera flashes sparked, and I stood right in the middle of it, calm, steady, almost untouchable. It was strange being back. Same place, same faces. But everything felt different. Or maybe I was different. The woman who once shrank in her husband's shadow no longer existed. I didn't need anyone to validate my presence. I was the presence. As I walked through the crowd, I could feel the whispers. Soft, curious, electric. That's her. The ex-wife. She's the one running that new foundation. I smiled politely, nodding as people parted to make way. Even the ones who once pretended I didn't exist now looked at me with measured admiration. And somewhere across the room, there he was. Daniel Hartman. Perfect suit, perfect smile, perfect lie. But something in his eyes had changed. That old arrogance had cracks now, hairline fractures only I could see. He looked at me for a long time, and I just smiled. Soft, confident, effortless. The kind of smile that says, I remember everything and I've already won. The evening rolled on with speeches, laughter, self-congratulations, the usual show. Daniel was in his element again, playing the charming philanthropist, talking about second chances and moving forward. The audience applauded like they'd forgotten everything. But I hadn't, and I wasn't here to clap. When the announcer took the stage for the awards, I felt my heartbeat slow instead of race. The air thickened, the lights dimmed, and then I heard my name. And the City Humanitarian Award goes to Mrs. Evelyn Hart, founder of the True Light Foundation. For a moment, everything stopped. The cameras turned toward me. Heads swiveled. Even Daniel froze mid-sip, his smile faltering just enough for the crowd to notice. Evelyn Hart, my name. The one he once told didn't belong. Now echoing through the same hall he'd tried to erase me from. I rose from my seat slowly, feeling every eye on me. But this time their gaze didn't burn. It lifted me. Every step toward that stage felt like reclaiming a piece of my soul. Daniel stepped forward. Of course he did. He had to hand me the award. Protocol, they said. Poetic, I thought. Our eyes met as I took the trophy from his hands. For a heartbeat, it was just us. No audience. No history. Just two people standing on the ruins of what they built, and one of them still standing tall. Congratulations, he whispered, his voice low, tight. You've really made something of yourself. I leaned closer, my smile steady. No, Daniel, I said softly. I just stopped being what you made of me. Then I turned to the microphone. I took a breath, steadying my voice. The room fell silent. You could hear glasses being set down. A single camera flash burst, then nothing but stillness. I wasn't supposed to be here tonight, I began. A year ago, I was told I didn't belong in rooms like this. That I wasn't elegant enough, important enough, worthy enough. A few murmurs. Daniel's jaw tightened. But the truth is, belonging doesn't come from the invitation. It comes from what you build, from how you rise, and how you choose to stand even after someone tries to make you invisible. The crowd was silent now, hanging on every word. Tonight isn't just about charity or redemption. It's about truth. And truth doesn't need a spotlight. It creates its own. I looked directly at him, not with hate, with calm, piercing grace. Some people mistake silence for weakness, but silence is where we find our strength. And when we rise from it, no one can put us back in the dark again. Applause erupted. Not polite applause. Real, thunderous, emotional applause. Some stood. Some even wiped tears. Daniel clapped too, stiffly, his mask cracking under the lights. Because the whole world could see it now. The man who once defined me was now being quietly erased by the woman who outgrew him. After the ceremony, people surrounded me, reporters, donors, strangers offering congratulations. But my eyes searched for only one face. And when I found him, he wasn't standing tall anymore. He was watching from a distance, hands in his pockets, that perfect composure finally gone. For a second, our eyes met again. No words this time? He gave a faint nod. Acknowledgement, regret, surrender. Then he turned and disappeared into the crowd. And just like that, the story ended where it began. A gala, a stage, a woman he underestimated. Only this time, I was the headline. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks back into the same room, quietly, beautifully, and lets the truth speak for itself. The morning after the gala, the world felt quieter, lighter somehow. The kind of quiet that doesn't ache anymore. The kind that feels like peace. I woke up to messages, hundreds of them. Journalists wanted interviews. People I hadn't heard from in years suddenly remembered my number. Messages flooded in from women, strangers, saying things like, "You gave me courage. Thank you for speaking what I never could. You reminded me I'm not invisible." I read every single one, slowly, with tears that didn't hurt this time. Because they weren't born from pain, they were born from recognition, from healing. I made myself tea instead of coffee that morning. Jasmine, the kind I used to drink before Daniel decided everything in the house had to look refined. I watched the sun rise over the city and realized, for the first time in years, I wasn't rushing anywhere. No meetings, no masks. No pretending, just me. I'd spent so long surviving him, I almost forgot how to live without him. But now, I had to rediscover what living for myself really meant. The headlines came later that day. Elena Hart steals the spotlight at Hartman Gala. From Humiliation to Hero, the woman who reclaimed her story. The True Light Foundation surpasses Hartman Charity in donations. Each one felt like poetic justice, but I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate his fall, because true revenge isn't about someone else's failure. It's about your freedom, and I was finally free. Weeks passed. Daniel's company took another hit. Donors withdrew, sponsors faded. Rumors said he was taking time off to reflect. I didn't care to know more. Not because I hated him, but because he no longer lived in my story. He was just a chapter I'd finished reading. I poured my energy into the foundation. We expanded outreach, built scholarships, partnered with shelters and small clinics. It wasn't glamorous. It was real. And every time someone said thank you, I felt something heal deeper inside me. One afternoon, while volunteering at a women's workshop, a young girl came up to me. Couldn't have been older than 19. She said softly, "You don't know me. But I saw your speech. I was in a bad relationship. You helped me leave." Her eyes shimmered with hope, raw and new. And in that moment, I realized my purpose wasn't to prove anything to Daniel. It was to help others find their voices, the way I found mine. Sometimes life gives you closure not through apologies, but through peace. Through mornings where your heart is quiet, through nights where you no longer replay what went wrong. I started writing again, not about him, but about resilience, healing, rebirth. People began inviting me to speak at events, panels, conferences, and every time I took the stage, I felt that same surge, not revenge, not pride, but strength. Months later, I attended another gala, this time one I had organized. No chandeliers, no designer gowns, just community, music, laughter, light, the kind of event that reminds you that kindness is still louder than ego. As I looked around the room, all those faces smiling, clapping, alive, I felt something simple, something pure. Joy. And in the back of my mind, a quiet voice whispered, "You did it." Not because I'd won, but because I'd healed. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming your power without losing your soul. And that's what I did. I turned the ashes of my humiliation into something beautiful, something honest, something mine. The woman who once walked out of that gala feeling small now walked through life unshakable because she finally understood. When they try to bury you, they don't realize you were a seed all along. Sometimes the real victory isn't proving them wrong. It's becoming so right, so whole, that their words can no longer reach you. They say every story has a headline, a few words that capture everything you've been through. Pain, loss, triumph, transformation. For a long time, mine was written by others. Betrayed wife. Humiliated at Gala. The CEO's forgotten partner. Each headline cut a little deeper, reminding me of the version of myself I was desperate to escape. But one day the world stopped defining me, because I began defining myself. And that's when the headline changed. Months after that night, a journalist from a national magazine reached out. They were running a feature called Women Who Rose from the Ashes. She asked me, "If you could title your own story, what would it be?" I thought about it for a long moment. All the pain, the humiliation, the quiet strength it took to rebuild, the courage it took to forgive. Then I smiled and said, "Call it The Woman Who Found Herself, right where they said she didn't belong." That title ran across the cover a month later. It wasn't just about me. It was about every woman who'd ever been told she was too small, too emotional, too unworthy of standing in the light. And when I saw it, something inside me finally settled. Not pride, not revenge, just peace. Because I realized the truth, the kind of truth that doesn't shout, but hums softly beneath your ribs. You don't need to destroy the ones who doubted you. You just need to become everything they said you couldn't be. I kept that magazine on my desk for a while, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of how far I'd come. A reminder that headlines fade, but character endures. Life isn't about the moments when they clap for you. It's about the nights you clap for yourself, quietly, alone. because you survived what was meant to break you. If I've learned anything from all this, it's that revenge isn't always about payback. Sometimes it's about becoming untouchable. It's about walking away so gracefully that your silence becomes the loudest thing they ever hear. And if you're listening right now, if you've ever felt invisible, small, or dismissed, remember this. One day, the world will see your name again. Maybe not in lights, maybe not in headlines, but in the way you carry yourself, in the peace on your face, in the strength in your voice. And that will be enough. More than enough. Soft closing tone, voice gentle, resolute. The night my husband humiliated me, I thought my story was ending. But now I know it was only just beginning. Because sometimes, the most beautiful headline you'll ever write is the one that starts with your own name.